Yeah. Do the muting. Okay, so here we are. We made it.
Yay!
Has your rye bread burned yet, kiddo?
We'll finish soon.
Yeah, I love your rye bread so much. So
I've never
this
had
is
your
the
rye
first.
bread.
Oh, it's lovely. This is the first episode of the Funeralistas. So
Woohoo!
welcome everybody. And well, there's the three of us. So who's going to go first?
I think you should go first.
Okay. I am Jess May, and I've been a funeral celebrant since 2013, and I'm pioneering new ways of doing ceremony for a new age and a new way. So I've been doing living funerals and all kinds of other things, and I'm the host of a podcast called Opening Ceremony with Jess May. Over to you, Katie.
Hello everybody. My name's Katie. I am a soul midwife, which is like a death doula, an end-of-life companion. I'm a funeral celebrant. Don't do weddings. I don't know how you lot do weddings. And I am a death educator. I have a CPD accredited death education course. Yes, you can learn about this stuff. I think you used the word pioneering then, didn't you? I'm trying to pioneer everybody talking about death and dying more, and making and helping people realise that it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. These things can be talked about with a lot of warmth, a lot of honesty, and I wish people understood that talking about it makes so much more of an impact. And I don't want to say positive stuff, but it has so many benefits to talking, and we don't talk because we think it's scary and we avoid it, and it only makes things worse. So I am here for all of that and to help people.
We three, on the other hand, talk about it all the time. Yeah. And that brings us neatly on to Gitte. Gitte to everyone.
Yes, so, I am also a funeral celebrant, like the two of you, which I think was maybe our core to begin with. And I do weddings because actually I love celebrating, and I think you can celebrate it. You can celebrate love too. And Katie, you will be starting that soon, so we want you to celebrate. And I actually think it's about for me, it's very much about the funeral day. So I think that could be celebrated. Lives should be celebrated, and I'm always floored by the stories of someone's life, and that's what I just love. That telling the person's life, whether that's me telling it or facilitating others telling it, and making the funeral day a really good day through a slightly shitty process sometimes, because there's also so much work and admin going on, which is also something that I do. And I really like to help people go through that process with less, take some burdens away and help them do it, and give them freedom to express themselves through that. As in, when it gets to the funeral, they feel they have expressed everything that they need to do and shared it with others, and gather people and share all those expressions of the people, and also in their relationships, not just about the person, also about people's relationship to the person, because the person's not there anymore. And that's why the people that are there are really important. And obviously that's very much my belief, because I'm a humanist, which means that I just believe in this life. So when they are dead, they're dead. But obviously, as we say, the cliche, they're living on in memories. So that's why we keep creating memories on the funeral day. That is a memory itself.
Absolutely.
So why have we invited you all to join us is the one thing. We basically we're all, is it fair to say, we're really, really passionate about funerals and the importance of them and how they make a difference. Katie, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to highlight going in. Well, you were just kind of saying it, why people should be here and listen. Can I just highlight the fact that all three of us are award finalists in the same category that will be announced? Obviously, there are three others. There are 6 people in it. So I think also that just highlights not just obviously how fabulous we are, but our dedication to our craft and to funerals and what we do and the way we do it. We are all so different. We're all so unique, yet we are all championing the same thing. So I just wanted to celebrate our successes, ladies, because people don't do that enough as it is.
I had totally forgotten that it was this week coming.
In the National Funeral Awards.
Yes,
which
national.
Is, I think it's important to say, is something that's run by the Good Funeral Guild, which is, and they promote personalised and authentic funerals, and actually it's not based on sometimes you have to enter awards and pay to enter and things like that. This is all based on reviews and
yes, all legitimate families
that know about your work. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all come
I'm
from
going to have
families.
Get my outfit ready. You can't wear your heels because you sprained your ankle.
Oh, I know. Well, I don't. I either do that thing where I dose myself up and have enough wine.
I bet you're going to wear animal print, aren't you?
Do you know, I have got an animal print dress, or I've got a bright coloured one, or I've got a very slinky little black dress. So it depends really how my ankle is. Because I was saying to Jess, I sprained it yesterday, so I did a funeral today, and it was throbbing, and I was in flats. So I'm gonna have to I'll get my 20-year-old Katie head on that would have braved it no matter what heels in the freezing cold with no jacket. I'm gonna have to get that mentality, get enough phenos down me that it won't matter.
You were that person. Of course you were. I should have known that.
Of course I was.
I mean, I have a topic for the day, and I can't go into why I have a topic for the day, but my topic for the day is what makes a bad funeral, because I never believed that a bad funeral could be a thing, because I've always had this thing that whatever's right for you is right for you, and I've been very sort of open about it. But I recently had an experience which has changed my mind, and I actually do have some opinions about what makes a bad funeral. So I just wonder whether you had some.
Can you hold that thought for a moment as I go and do my very important task on checking on my rye bread?
Only if you keep me a slice.
About your outfits and the award for 1 minute, please.
Okay, we can do that.
So Katie loves leopard print and animal print in general. I also am not averse, but Gitte absolutely hates animal print. So we always send her photographs of animal print, don't we?
Yeah.
So we're like the three amigos, aren't we? And we decided to call ourselves the Funeralistas. We've been cooking this up literally for so long, over the course of 3 years, I think. And we've been sat in saunas talking about it, and sitting on the beach talking about it, and having coffees talking about it.
Yeah.
And now it's the time. So that's what we're doing next. Oh, here she is. She's back. Right, Gitte, start off with what you think a bad funeral is.
Well, an example of the worst funeral I've been to, actually the two worst funerals I've been to, not done of course, was two very, very close friends that had that unfortunately suffered tragic deaths, and where the family for some reason chose not to be honest, chose not to intentionally choose the celebration of life as a celebration, and also didn't understand what was maybe needed for everyone there. One was a Catholic funeral for someone who took their own life, and Catholics don't like to say that. So I thought that was a shame. Maybe some do. This one didn't, and I think that it had repercussions. And the other one was tragic death, where we don't like to shame, but I don't believe that the celebrant was intentionally chosen, and they'd worked with the family enough to understand what was needed. And it just meant that it felt horrible leaving. It felt like the life wasn't celebrated. It felt like the person delivering the ceremony didn't understand the person or what other people there needed, and it wasn't an honest or warm or authentic celebration of their life at all. And it felt empty. It felt so empty. It almost felt worse. The death almost felt worse, even though they were tragic, which was horrible, but it almost felt worse because the funeral did nothing to let people start grieving or feel like it was saying goodbye to the person properly, or even share. There was no sharing of anything.
And this is what I'm really interested in. It feels to me like a bad funeral is a funeral that makes things worse rather than better. Have you got thoughts, Katie? I know you have. Of course you have.
Do you know what? I was just sitting there thinking, trying to, in my head, articulate quite simply what makes a bad funeral. And I think, based on what you've just said, Gitte, and I know about your situation, Jess, my thoughts are, it's a bad funeral if two things: if it doesn't honour the person that's died, and if it doesn't support the people's grief that are there. Now, when I say about honouring the person that's died, it could be that it's a bright coloured, colourful, true celebration and party where there's humour and laughter and videos and bright coloured orders of services, and it could be that. But it could be honouring the person as well, where it is a religious or faith-based service. It's honouring them because it is of a humanist ilk. It's honouring them because it is done in a traditional, appropriate manner with hymns and black and in that level, you know, that kind of respect, if that is right for the person. So honouring somebody is so unique, and it has to be appropriate for that person. And I think then that what then has that knock-on effect on the people that are there. If they feel that they have somebody that they know would have really valued a traditional service that was in black, done quite, as I say, exactly as I said, traditional, a lot of customary things, a lot of things that are expected, that would have really worked for somebody. If that person goes to honour, let's call him Bob. If Steve goes to honour Bob and has that expectation of Bob being very old school in his values, Steve rocks up and and there's these really lively music, or they're the celebrant or person of faith or whoever it is in bright colours, and they're laughing, and that's not honouring. So therefore that is not supporting Steve's experience of his grief, knowing that his mate Bob, this isn't him. And I think, yes, there are things like where it breaks my heart and boils my blood at the same time, where people get names wrong, when people clearly they've scripted something, they've realised they've ballsed up, and then there's gone, oh, so when Mary, Steve, oh, was it you know, when people fluff up and they haven't got a clue what they're doing, that makes a bad funeral. But that is all encompassed in the honouring the dead person, and then obviously supporting the grieving people. On another thing, sorry, just one more thing with that is the conversations I've had with people recently, or a couple of people I can think of, about funerals and what makes them good or the right kind of funeral for that person. Someone kept using the word positive, and I said, I think a funeral should be an experience you want to remember. It should be something you want to cherish, that you walk away from going, I wish that never happened. My friend or my person should still be here, but I have this memory now that I will hold close. It's not something I want to leave over there and forget like it ever happened. And they kept going on about it being a positive experience and doing it in a positive way. And I said, I don't think positive's the right word. I think it's appropriate. So I think a good funeral is appropriate for that person. And that could be animal print everything. I did a service for one woman who was all animal print and sunflowers. Yet the next day was a service where it was all black, like I said, and very kind of old school and traditional, because that was right for them. So it's not about it being a positive experience. It's about being an appropriate experience for that person, I think.
For example, in the case of the two I have bad memories of, where there was nothing positive about their deaths, and it should reflect the person and the way they lived, but the death itself can also have an effect on the funeral.
That's what I'm talking.
And
yeah,
and if you're not honest about what happened, and this is sometimes really, really hard and understandable for close family or close friends, really hard to talk about someone who's taken their own life, because they might not still understand it, and they might feel a lot of guilt, and I think that it helps to not make it a mystery. You know, you have to be literal about these things. That can be done in a very kind way by acknowledging it. Everyone there will also feel like, okay, it's okay to be here, you know, and it's not okay what happened, but it's okay to be here. And then you can also, the next layer is, like you said, about doing it in the way that the person led their life. But if it is a tragic death, even if they led a colourful life, it might not be that. Maybe the ceremony is not the colourful thing, but there can still be, you know, we have ways of, you know, like I want photo tributes and all of that stuff that can do a bit of both, right? And so I 100% agree. But do you know what? Often, when I have not been a celebrant, obviously, I don't feel like any ceremonies I've done are bad. Not in the way that I was bad or good, but that, you know, hopefully we had such good communication and, you know, gave the family space to do what they needed to do. But in the cases where I've seen it, where I left empty or with bad memories were actually because the person that was responsible for leading, facilitating and creating that experience of the funeral, celebrant or minister of some kind or whatever, they just either didn't take the time, or they didn't understand what was needed, or there wasn't one. And even though, and this is another one that I have experienced where it was family led, which can be a beautiful thing. It can be a beautiful thing, but you need somebody to guide that experience. And I think the last funeral I did, actually, they started off saying, oh, we have 4 people that want to speak, we're just going to have that. And I was just going to be the undertaker, the one doing the arrangements and stuff. And I just introduced and I said, that I'm also a celebrant and this is what works. And I can also just advise you on the structure and timing. And suddenly they realized, actually, we know nothing about the structure and the timings, how things work at the crematorium where they wanted it to have. And they didn't understand those things. They chose to have me as a celebrant as well. And I just saw them this morning, actually. And they were just saying how happy they are with the way it went.
This is something that I would really hope for from this podcast, actually. And this has reignited, this recent experience has reignited my passion for it. So if you're listening, I just really want you to understand that if you change your mind about you're doing it family, fine, and then you meet a celebrant as the right person, do it. Because I really have learned that recently, that what we do is really skilled and really important. And I've never been one to talk like that. I've always thought, a family, they can all do it. But what we do, you wouldn't just say, I'll try and do that heart operation because, it's not, it's actually really, really skilled and really specific, the skills that we use. And so I love that they chose you and that they're going to do that. Because apart from anything else, it makes it easier for you, the people that are dealing with your grief, to then have to learn a whole new set of skills where you can pay someone who already has them. So I was thinking about what I think about making what makes a bad funeral really ties in with what you're saying. But the heart of what I feel is that a bad funeral is a funeral where you feel unsafe. And I think all of this is kind of making you feel safe. If you go somewhere and the person we go to Gita's funeral and there's a coffin wrapped in leopard print, we're immediately feeling like whoever's leading this thing doesn't know this person, and that feels really
spontaneously combust, and you can all go with me.
We're still going to do it. But I just think, I just would like your thoughts about what for you makes people safe, and whether you agree with that analysis, that's part of what makes a bad funeral.
Before do you have more to share, Jess, about recent experiences or anything you experienced about bad funerals?
Yeah, I'm being really sensitive about it because I obviously can't be too explicit and I don't want to hurt anybody. But I'm very happy to talk about the funeral director nearly dropping the coffin and the people being sat at the back and no funeral director coming to the fore and saying and behaving like an usher. We didn't receive the orders. It's really stupid things, like we arrive, they give us a charity, like a piece of paper with the charity on it, but no orders of service. So we're looking at this thing thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. We don't know what it is. We walk in, no one ushers us to our seats. No one tells us where the family is sitting. No one makes sure that we fill up from the front. So everyone sits at the back. So there's a massive gap between the gap and the front, and no one has any orders of service. So we're already feeling a bit panicky. Then we get the order of service. There's no celebrant. So that feels a bit odd, and there's someone at the front looking really upset by the microphone, and I thought, well, that feels a bit unsafe as well, because this woman's clearly quite distressed, and that's quite odd if she's a celebrant, and I didn't know who she was. And then it just went on like that. Then they nearly dropped him. Then before they dropped him, they said, we'll move you forward. So then everybody had to get up. They managed to make it there. They'd sat down, then they had to get up and move to the front so that it didn't feel awkward. Then they came in and everyone was so unsafe. They were still talking when the coffin came in. You couldn't hear the music, so there was no sense of occasion or it starting. No one knew it had started, so people carried on talking. So all of these things sound really mundane and logistical, and they are, but they're the kinds of things that celebrants insist upon, and we would make sure that we collaborate. And funeral directors, quite honestly, I don't know who they were, but that's what you expect from a decent funeral director. So all of those things, those practicalities, I'm really happy to share. There are other things that I can't share because I'm respecting the family. But I felt, the emptiness that you talk about, I actually felt that it caused more grief than we went in with. And again, this was a tragic death, and it was again not referenced. And then it was led by someone who was actually a relative but didn't introduce herself and wasn't leading it. So no one started it, no one ended it, no one led it. Then they couldn't use the music, they didn't know how to press the buttons, and the funeral director did not step up, did not say what to do. So they left the tracks on for too long. Everyone sat. I'm going absolutely crazy because it's like being a doctor and seeing someone have a heart attack and not being able to get up. That's what I felt like. And I was getting increasingly angry because I thought this is so difficult. There were family there, vulnerable people, children. And they just were like, oh, we'll try and work out the music in a minute. And then people were back and forth. And then it went on for 3 minutes where it should have been a minute. And so people were getting more and more kind of unsafe, really, not knowing what was going to happen next. And then it just went on like that. It was like a catalogue of just really simple logistical things that made everyone feel unsafe. And then the order of it, because they weren't trained in what we do, it didn't have any structure or any shape. And then at the end, there was a piece of music that was all about, it was really, really not upbeat. There was no commendation. There was no ending. And then the funeral directors didn't tell us when to leave. So we all sat, and they closed the curtains and we all just sat there. And there was no music, and there was no, and now would you like to go to the door? And nobody knew what to do. So that in a nutshell is what made me feel unsafe. And I can't go really into the specifics, but because I was trying to think about how do I share this, how do I talk about this and protect people. But that was my experience, ladies. So I would love your thoughts.
Well, just because I both do the practical parts and sometimes I do both the arranging, but for example, if I am a celebrant on the day, I will have somebody else conduct at the venue, because actually both the funeral director and the celebrant is really, really important. I used to actually want to advance that not using funeral directors, but I think actually it's about using the right type of funeral director, and maybe I still have a problem with the funeral directors or traditional ones, but in some of them and the way it's done. But being on that side, there are so many things you can't see and what has happened before, how you are a ninja. If a good funeral director is like a ninja, that just not killing people, but supporting people in such a smooth way. And if you were to arrange a funeral without a funeral director, the celebrant has to be there, and that celebrant has to be more than just your bog standard celebrant. It's really, really important to understand those things. You have to be super experienced, or like the three of us have done, actually trained further in being able to lead family-led funerals and things like that, and understand all the practicalities. It's just, like you said, it's just so important. And those little things are just worth their weight. I mean, they don't have a weight, but they are worth so much. They are so valuable. Like you just said there, the little things. It wasn't about what they said, I'm sure, what people contribute their tributes. It wasn't particularly about that. It was all the little things that made it all fall apart. It's just so important. People do not have energy, mental energy or strength to see through that. It is an experience you need to be taken through. And actually, often when people say, I don't know if I can speak, and their tribute, I said, well, I can do it for you, because maybe today is the day that you have an experience rather than you take responsibility for something.
Well, we'll add then that there was a young adult wanted to play a piece of music that had been written by their parent, who had died, and because this person had been encouraged by whoever, or someone had said, oh no, that's fine, you do it, no one like any of us had said, absolutely, if you want to do it, great, but if you don't want to do it, also fine. We won't put it in the order of service, and then you can opt in or you can opt out when you get there. And actually what I find is that people, if they feel really held and safe in the way that you describe, they tend to find either you can say, well, exactly what you said, that this is a day for you to experience rather than feeling that pressure, and you're in a little bit of a position where you have the authority to say that, or you do the opposite thing and you just encourage and you just say, I'm here for you and I can be on standby. This quite often happens with readings, doesn't it? We're a hand to hold, and just that knowledge that you can opt out and that there's somebody holding your hand gives you the courage to do it sometimes. And as it was, that it was in the order of service, it was announced, and then this person just couldn't do it. And then I felt really upset for them, because I just thought that didn't have to happen either. And that's because there was no leading, and it's absolutely no fault of the family. They just don't know what we know. Katie, what were you going to say?
No, that's what I was going to say. It's education. And I think I am all for families having choice and autonomy and doing things in any which way that they want. And there's two situations. I've got one coming up where a family said, look, we don't really want you to do anything. In fact, we don't even know if we need you, because this is what we want to do. And they were very clear. And I said, okay, so when that happens, how's that going to happen? So who's going to press that button? And then they kind of went, oh, okay, yeah, maybe we do need you, because they just didn't understand the logistics, the processes, what you need to do in that moment, how things work. Literally, as we know, every single crematorium is different music systems. Some have screens, buttons, under the lectern, over the lectern, doorbells to let the chapel attendant know in some of the old school crematoriums. So it's not as simple as, right, well, we'll lead it and we'll just do it all and do the tributes. You've got those finer details, but it's also the education of, okay, so this is your moment, your person's moment. And I think the safety thing is such a good point. That kind of sums up everything we said in the beginning. I will say to people, well, even if I just literally start and stop and you take over in between, I've got you. So whatever happens in that half an hour, whatever is going on, I'm there. So you lead, because when people have said things like, we don't want you to come up and introduce every speaker, we're just going to do our thing. It's like, okay, great. But there's one where they had 4 people and they were going to come up one after the other. One spoke, the other one looked around, and then it was, so I just stepped in and said, and now I'd like to invite up. And it was, oh, okay, it is me. So thank God I was there, not for any other reason than just to keep everything flowing for them. And I think when people are at least willing to have a conversation with us as celebrants or ministers or just deaf people, like ask people the question, I'm thinking of doing a funeral, like family led, and we're thinking of doing it all ourselves. What do we need to know? Because I think if people really, I'm really sad for you as my friend, but for that person and their family that they've had that experience, because had they just maybe thought outside the box a little bit or thought to seek a little bit more understanding, they may have chosen to do things differently, or they may have actually had a little bit more knowledge to go, oh, okay, this is actually how we need to do it. But it's also really sad that the funeral director didn't step in, do anything, like even asking them to stand or to pay attention with the music and the coffin coming in. So I think this also highlights not just the education about how a funeral service works. So if we're specifically talking about families, if anybody's thinking, well, I'd like to do it, either I'll lead it, I'll be a celebrant, or we don't need anybody to lead it, we'll just manage it between ourselves. Not only do you need to educate yourself on the processes of a funeral, seek out a celebrant to talk to, but also seek out one that you actually quite like the sound of or look of. Connect to somebody that you think has got the similar vibe and that gets you, because they will actually get you and be able to talk you through that. You may then decide we could be like master of ceremonies more than anything. A lot of the time it's just us inviting people up, letting people know what's happening, asking people to stand, pressing a few buttons. We may not be saying anything, and we can do that. But I think not only educate yourself on that, but also educate yourself on your funeral director. Shop around. Who do you actually like? Has anybody got the same or similar ethos? Who's got the right vibe? Do you feel right with them? Do you feel safe with them? And what are they kind of offering you? I would have hoped that a family that walked into a funeral director's and said, right, this is what we want to do, a funeral director would immediately go, oh, okay, like we need to either up our game with the level of support, or this isn't for us because we don't do those extras that you might need. You know, be open and transparent enough to go, this isn't for us, but we've got whatever down the road, maybe talk to them. That's the integrity that funeral directors, I think, should work with.
This is, in my role as funeral director, that is it. The first conversation, maybe even the first call, I will even ask, have you already discussed? Has the person expressed any wishes? Have you got any thoughts? And often, actually, they say themselves, I have no idea what to do. And we invite them in for a meeting, and that meeting, we might not sign paperwork, we might not do anything. Some funeral directors just has that one meeting and okay, what coffin would you want? What do? I don't have that conversation until I have already heard, you know, what is it? I almost, like we talk about with weddings, Jess, it's like sometimes we ask a couple for a wedding, and I have done this with families and friends with the funeral as well. It's like, how do you want to feel? How do you, what do you feel on that day? What do you want people to remember? And then they might say, I want to remember her animal prints, or I want to remember those stories. There are some great stories, you know, so I want these people to tell their stories. Okay, so then I know it's all about that. And then I know about us creating a safe space for telling stories, or the other things. Animal print, okay, I'm going to find that animal print coffin, or I think there's one near Brighton that has a jaguar print hearse or something like that. You know, so this could be a thing, but that's really important. I so agree. And I'm going to go back to your earlier point about the ceremony, that sometimes you're not the one talking all the way through. You're just master of ceremonies. But there is something really, I think, really important. How we start and how we finish. And you did touch on that as well before, Katie. How we start is like, exactly, if we know, how do they want to feel? What do they want people to remember? How do they want to feel? Well, let's start with that tone. Let's say to people, it's okay to be sad, or say it's okay to be happy. And actually, what we're going to hear today are lots of stories. And if something makes you smile or laugh, please do. You know,
yes.
And we say at the beginning, we're going to hear some music. Please enjoy it. That's what, you know, we're going to give that permission at the beginning. And at the end, like you said, Jess, with your experience, this is, oh my God, how important is it to know we are coming to the end now? What we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to exit over here and we're going to hear this song. And yes, you can go and approach the coffin on your way out, or leave a flower, or please wait for the family to go first, or whatever, you can say some logistic things, and then you say these things that you want people to leave with. You know, we're going to hear this. It could just be, we're going to hear this song because it talks about this, and this is, as you all know, as you probably know by now, this is exactly what this person was about. So when you go, think about this, blah, blah, you know?
I've taken, Gitte did it a minute ago and put a hand up, so I thought I'd do the same thing. Just a couple of quick thing on that. I think the telling people what's going to happen is really key. And I went to a service of a friend of mine a couple of years ago. I was her sole midwife, but she had she had a very religious faith. So she had a faith-based service, because she was like, oh, you're not offended, I'm not asking you. I was like, I'll let you off. So I went, but there were so many things that didn't work. There were so many things that did, but there were so many things that didn't work. And it was so busy, it was packed out. So that was the other thing. If you're going to research your celebrant or person and funeral director, please also research the crematorium. Is it actually going to be fit for purpose? Because the one that they chose, because it was local, was not fit for purpose at all. They could have gone for a double slot. They should have done, because the amount of people there, let alone the content. But anyway, I could barely see what was going on, and they didn't announce anything about the curtains, and suddenly I looked over and they were halfway shut. So I didn't feel I had my moment to say or feel whatever I needed to feel. But also, I think what's really important about the start and the end as well, and the being held and the safety, that as soon as people walk into that situation, whether you're in a crematorium, a church, a chapel, a village hall, a football stadium, whatever you're doing, it's the start of something. You know, and when, not just the start of the service, it's the start. It's a poignant moment in time with your feelings, and whatever happens in that 10 minutes, hour, whatever it is a really big deal. Whether you feel it in that moment or not, it's an experience you're having that will stay with you, and hopefully for the right reasons. But I think what's even more important is, even if you've got little old Betty who's 99, had a lovely peaceful death and a really rich life, and it's all lovely and fluffy. I think it's the times when it's not that. So, but we've all had those situations. And when I think about the services I've done and that I've been part of, if it has been suicide, tragic, sudden, it's even more important that they have somebody like us at the beginning to either, call it out, don't call it out, whether they want us to skim over it. Do they want it? Do they want the word suicide said? What language do they prefer? How do they want this acknowledged? Do they want that person's death shared about in whichever way? So we're all for honesty and openness, but actually I've done some services where people have said, like, do not mention it. And I have said, even just one word to say, we are not going to focus on their death today. We know why we're here. We are not going to go there. What we are going to do is this. And they're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But even that, like you said, sets the tone. People then know, okay, fine, we're just not going to go there today. Or it gives people permission when you say, yes, this person ended their own life. And you deal with it then. So it's like you said, Gitte, I say similar things to people. How do you want to feel? Where are we going with this? What is the hope that emotionally we want to achieve today? So I did a friend of mine's son who took his own life, and she was very she said, I don't really know where to go with this. So she said, you write it and then let me know. And I wrote it. She said, I can't read it. I'm just going to wing it. So I was, as in she was going to trust me with it. So the fear was real. But oh my God, the impact was incredible, because I judged her based on how we spoke, what I knew about the family, and you kind of put it together. And I said the word suicide multiple times. I talked about the reality of how much this sucks. I talked about all the unanswered questions. I talked about the anger that go, and I just laid it all out bare. And everyone was like, thank God. Like there was this real permission for people to go, oh my God, this actually sucks. And just to acknowledge it, and everybody felt something about amidst, someone could connect with something that I'd said. So I think whatever we're talking about, the expectation, how people want to feel, the start of that, and then the end of that is even more powerful, because if we've opened up a can of emotional worms, which grief does and funerals do, people need to know that when that can opens, we're there. They need to know that if they're shutting that can, which in some ways they are, but we know they're really not, when you leave a funeral, we are also there. So I think it's the start and the end, actually, I think is probably the most important part of it for our job during service. Because if it has gone wrong,
we can say that we are can openers and also very good at putting it in the recycling afterwards.
There we go.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Can openers and good at putting it in the recycling afterwards. Yeah. I mean, all of that really, really helpful. And the reason why people who are listening, the Funeralistas, are taking to the road is because we know this stuff. And so we've found a few venues in Brighton, and we're planning to do the whole of Sussex. And we're going to be coming to your community and sitting with you, probably over tea and cake or coffee and cake, and sharing with you our expertise and our knowledge, because we're not actually doing this because we want to make a lot of money. We're doing this because we know that it makes the difference between people healing and people really not healing. I mean, I don't even have a word for it, but it is, we know that it heals people to do it well, and that it really damages people to do it bad. But I really don't want people to think that if something didn't work for you in a funeral, that you can't put it right, because you can have a memorial a year later, a month later, you can do something completely what you need. Because the other thing, and we'll talk about this another time, is that there are gatekeepers, there are people that take the lead who perhaps just had to because no one else could, because they're in shock. There's all kinds of reasons why it doesn't work for you, but it doesn't mean that you have to do the whole thing again with all the same people either. You can redo something with different people in a different context and put that right. So don't be thinking, oh, it didn't work and it's just one shot and you can't put it right after. You can have, there's various things on there that you can do.
But I think that's a really valuable point as well. I mean, we talk about you only get one chance to get it right. And I get that in the sense of that moment of saying goodbye to that person. But you have many moments after that and opportunities to support your own feelings. Like you could have say that I know people that have died on a certain day and time, and the family get together every week on the same day and the same time, to whether it's over a Zoom call, whether it's in the pub. So you may have missed that moment, so create a new one is what I'm saying. Like you said, if something didn't go right, and grief comes with guilt by its just very nature, doesn't it? Grief makes you question everything. So when things don't go as well, those other layers are already there. They're just thicker now with all the other stuff that you go, oh, I should have done this, I could have done that, and all the questions and the what ifs. But I think that that's also just a lesson for life, isn't it, for all of us, that even with your feelings, even with the really challenging stuff, there's always opportunities, like reconnect to that, do something, have a moment, like I said, have a memorial, read a prayer at the same time every day, go to that place every month on that date because that's significant, connect with that person once a year and get together, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be huge, but it's those. And John Adams, our friend at he was the past president of the National Association of Funeral Directors, he talks about like connection points. Create those. Your funeral is a connection point, but you can create mini ones of those that support your feelings and your grief for the rest of your life if you need to.
Yeah, I love that. It's just that, isn't it? Just connecting. And if you don't feel like you're connecting with everyone around you and you're not connecting with the person, what happens when we don't feel safe? I was just thinking, it's a bit like, so Gita's a teacher. When we grieve, we become children, I feel. And you wouldn't leave a whole load of toddlers in a room and not tell them what time they were starting, what they were going to learn, and what time they were going to finish, and where the toilets were, and all the things, because they'd just freak out. Anyway, so if you're in that state, you're childlike in the moment, and you don't know what's going on, you then can't connect with your person either, and you can't connect with the people around you. You can't connect with your own grief because you're just in a kind of chaotic state. So
I love that.
I think connection. Yeah,
I think that's so true. And we are grief. You're raw and vulnerable in grief, whether you show it outwardly or not, whether you're a kind of feely, open, chatty person or not. Grief cracks you wide open in some way. And I think the analogy of toddlers is brilliant.
It's just the vulnerability, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that is why family dynamics flare and why you don't get on with your brother in the moment and all of that, because you're just children again.
I do agree. And that's why we have to be there as the teachers, or I wouldn't say parents, and also I don't teach little ones.
I understand why.
My teaching is my side hustle. This is my thing. Yeah. So we all agree that the holding it all together is actually so important, and with all the little details that we said. So how do you choose the right celebrant then?
I think we might have to use that, like the next one we do, we should do, because we've been chatting for an hour, which has been really, really important. I think we should use that for our next topic.
Yeah.
And
let's do that.
And then people should get in touch with us and ask, let us know where you are. If you have a community hall or some kind of community group and you'd like us to visit, we would love to come, and we can answer your questions in person. And if you text us, we can reply. We really, really want you to know that you have choices.
And also, if obviously people don't wait to arrange a funeral after they've seen us, it just happens, and it has to happen straight away. You're being told you've got to call a funeral director, which is often why you sometimes end up with the wrong one, because someone has just said use this, or a care home, or a hospice, or I don't think hospices are really good like that, but it could be that you don't choose one because you don't know that you're supposed to shop around. You're supposed to figure out the right one. Same thing with celebrants. But it could also be that you are listeners, that you are, or viewers, that you are thinking about putting down your own wishes. Maybe you're thinking about taking this burden off the people that have to arrange the funeral, or that are things that are really important to you. Like, my funeral wishes is no animal print. I know it's not going to be upheld, but still.
I will be there. If you go before me, I am coming head to toe in animal print.
So am I.
Only Katie is allowed.
We'll see about that.
Yes.
Well, everybody's been really, really nice.
If you do want to plan, I don't think we like to say that you're going to put down, this is my plan, but you can put down your wishes, because no matter what our beliefs are, the person, you are not going to be there on the day, at least not in body, where you can do anything about it. So it really is for the people that attend the funeral. So what are your wishes? And maybe we should finish with one thing that we all have as our wishes. Can I go first? Mine's
Do
not
it.
that specific because there will be a long plan for this, or wishes. But for me, for example, no matter how old I am, my wishes are about the people left behind that are most important, which are my 2 daughters. So what's going to happen on that day or actual festival, it will be about what is supporting my daughters, which, for example, will be to bring in the people. It's almost like a naming or a christening where you have guide or godparents. I want to bring in people that will continue to be there for them, like God or guide parents for a child. No matter how old I am or they are, I want to create something where those people will continue to be their community that will support them through that, and afterwards when we're no longer there.
I'd like to be one of those,
It'll be
please.
something really practical around that, but that's the mission.
That's amazing. I love that, and I'm definitely volunteering for the role. Katie, what about you?
Well, see, you went quite deep. The first thing that came to my head when you said about wishes is that I really, really want Chesney Hawkes, I Am the One and Only, at some point, if not the general theme tune to my funeral. It's been a song of mine for years since school. So yeah, I either want to come into it, and it starts with a bam, and it kicks off. I want to like that as I come in. And then maybe have it as well for some kind of visual tribute. But I want a few of those as well. But Chesney Hawkes is going to feature heavily in my funeral.
Everybody thinks that you're really deep, and now they know.
It can't feature heavily because there's only one song. You're just going to have to.
It'll be repeated.
One song over and over. You only had one song.
Pretty much. Yeah, well, and that's exactly what will be. It'll be my entry song, it'll be my time of reflection, and it'll be my exit music.
Well, everyone, none of us knew that. Like, we know her really, really well, and who could ever have guessed that? My thing is, I would like everybody to bring a bunch of flowers. It's a little bit similar to what you're talking about, Gitte, where I want people to feel held and for everyone to feel looked after. So I'm massively into flowers, so that there won't be any, please don't bring flowers. I want you to bring masses of flowers. And what I want you all to do is to bring a bunch each and swap bunches of flowers. So you'll go home with something. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I mean, really like have to do idea. It. All right, everybody, we're going to come back next week and talk about how you choose your celebrant. All right. We should have like a goodbye thing, like a thing we say at the end.
I was just thinking, we need like something shorter and snappier. So if we're going to start talking about funerals, all 3 of us could be here forever talking about the wishes and things that we want. So yeah, I think next time we need to think of like a little closing, or like a witty one-liner, like the Funeralistas something.
The Funeralistas. Everybody write in
something like
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll see you next week.